Antonio Valentino's hand froze halfway to his whiskey glass when his phone rang. The caller ID showed his lawyer's number, and something in his gut twisted with an unfamiliar dread. 6 months had passed since the divorce papers were signed. 6 months since Elena had walked out of his life with nothing but the clothes on her back and a heart full of accusations he couldn't deny. "What is it, Morrison?" His voice carried the same cold authority that made grown men tremble, but tonight it felt hollow. "Sir," the lawyer's voice was strained, uncertain. "I just received a call from St. Mary's Hospital. There's been a situation. A woman named Elena Rodriguez was admitted tonight for childbirth complications." Antonio's blood turned to ice. "And she listed you as the father on the emergency contact forms. Sir, she had a baby, a little girl." The crystal tumbler slipped from Antonio's fingers, shattering against the marble floor of his penthouse office. 6 months. The timeline crashed through his mind like a freight train. Their last night together before everything fell apart. The fight that had torn them apart forever. The secrets, the lies, the betrayal that had destroyed everything they'd built. "Is she?" His voice cracked, a sound he hadn't made since he was 12 years old watching his own father's funeral. "Are they okay?" "The baby is in NICU. Elena, she's stable but weak. Sir, there's something else. She refused to put your name on the birth certificate. She listed, father unknown." Antonio closed his eyes, the weight of 6 months of regret crushing down on him like a physical force. Elena had been pregnant when she left, pregnant and alone, facing everything by herself while he'd been drowning in whiskey and rage, convinced she'd betrayed him with another man. The evidence had seemed so clear, the photos so damning. But now, I'm on my way. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Your support means everything to us as we bring you these intense love stories. 6 months earlier, Elena Rodriguez had stood in the marble foyer of the Valentino mansion, her hands shaking as she held the divorce papers. The woman she'd thought was her best friend, Maria, stood beside Antonio with a satisfied smirk, her manicured hand resting possessively on his arm. "Just sign them, Elena." Antonio's voice had been cold as winter steel. "We both know this marriage was a mistake." Elena's heart had shattered into a million pieces, but she'd kept her chin high. The photos scattered across his desk told a story she couldn't deny. Images of her having coffee with Detective James Morrison, the undercover cop who'd been investigating Antonio's businesses. What Antonio didn't know, what she could never tell him without destroying everything, was that Morrison was her brother, her half-brother she'd only discovered existed 3 months into their marriage. She'd been protecting Antonio, feeding Morrison false information to keep him away from the legitimate parts of Antonio's empire. But the photos made it look like she was the informant, the betrayer, the woman who'd married him for information. "I'm pregnant," she'd whispered, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. Antonio's dark eyes had flashed with something. Hope, fear, rage, she couldn't tell. But Maria had laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "How convenient. Whose baby is it really, Elena? Your cop boyfriend's?" The slap had come before Elena could stop herself, her palm connecting with Maria's cheek with a sharp crack. But it was Antonio's reaction that had destroyed her completely. He'd stepped between them, protecting Maria, his face a mask of cold disgust as he looked at Elena. "Get out," he'd said quietly. "Get out before I do something we'll both regret." So she had. She'd signed the papers, taken nothing but her clothes, and disappeared into the Chicago streets with nothing but the baby growing inside her, and a heart that felt like it might never heal. For 6 months she'd worked 3 jobs, cleaning offices at night, waitressing during lunch shifts, and doing data entry from her tiny studio apartment. She'd saved every penny for the baby, never once reaching out to Antonio, even when the pregnancy complications started. Even when the doctor warned her about the risks. She'd rather die than let him think she was using their child to manipulate him back into her life. But tonight, as the contractions had hit her like lightning bolts, and she'd collapsed in the restaurant kitchen, the paramedics had needed an emergency contact. And despite everything, despite the divorce and the betrayal and the 6 months of silence, there was only one name that mattered. Antonio Valentino, the father of her child. The man who'd thrown her away like garbage, but who she'd never stopped loving. Now as she lay in the hospital bed, weak and exhausted, she could hear the commotion in the hallway, the sound of expensive shoes on linoleum, The hushed voices of hospital staff suddenly speaking in respectful, fearful tones. He was here. The NICU was a fortress of glass and beeping machines, but Antonio Valentino walked through it like he owned the place. Which, Elena realized with a bitter laugh, he probably did. The Valentino family had donated millions to St. Mary's Hospital over the years. She watched through her room's window as he stood before the incubator, his massive frame dwarfing the tiny infant inside. Even from a distance, she could see the way his hands shook as he placed them against the glass. The most feared man in Chicago, reduced to trembling by a 4-pound baby girl. "She's beautiful," came his voice from her doorway, rough with emotion she'd never heard before. Elna didn't turn around. She couldn't. Seeing him again after 6 months was like being struck by lightning. Painful, shocking, and impossible to ignore. "She's not yours to claim." The hell she isn't. His footsteps were measured, controlled, but she could hear the barely leashed fury beneath. 6 months, Elena. 6 months you kept this from me. Like you kept Maria from me? The words came out sharper than she'd intended, but she was too tired to care. Like you kept the fact that you were sleeping with my best friend while I was planning our future. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. When she finally turned, Antonio was standing at the foot of her bed, his dark eyes blazing with an emotion she couldn't read. "I never touched Maria," he said quietly. Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The photos don't lie, Antonio. I saw her leaving your office at midnight. I saw the way she looked at me the next morning like she'd won some prize. You saw what she wanted you to see." Antonio's voice was deadly calm now, the voice he used before he destroyed someone completely. "What I want to know is why you were meeting with Detective Morrison 3 times a week for 2 months. The blood drained from Elena's face. She'd known this moment would come eventually, but she'd hoped. She'd prayed she'd never have to choose between protecting her brother and protecting the man she loved. "He's my brother," she whispered. The words hit Antonio like a physical blow. She watched him stagger backward, his face cycling through disbelief, understanding, and finally devastating realization. "Your brother," he repeated slowly. "The cop investigating my family is your brother. Half-brother. I didn't know he existed until after we were married. When he approached me, I thought..." Elena's voice broke. "I thought I could protect you both. Feed him false information, keep him away from anything that could hurt you. I was trying to save you, Antonio. I was trying to save us. And Maria knew. It wasn't a question." Elena nodded, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "She saw us together, threatened to tell you unless I helped her get close to you. She said she'd make it look like I was the informant, that I'd married you for information. So you did what she asked. I tried to stay away from you, tried to give her opportunities while feeding James useless information, but she wanted more. She wanted you to choose her over me, and she knew exactly how to make that happen." Antonio was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her face like he was seeing her for the first time. "The night before you left, when I found you crying in the garden, I'd just found out I was pregnant. I was trying to figure out how to tell you, how to explain about James without destroying everything. But Maria..." Elena closed her eyes, remembering the vicious smile on her former friend's face. "She said you'd never believe me, that you'd think I was lying to trap you." She was right. The admission seemed to tear from Antonio's throat. "I didn't believe you. I thought the worst of you, and I threw you away like you meant nothing." The machines around Elena's bed beeped steadily, the only sound in the room as 6 months of pain and misunderstanding hung between them like a physical presence. "She's not on your birth certificate," Antonio said finally. "No. Why?" Elena met his eyes, seeing the man she'd fallen in love with beneath the cold mask he wore for the world. "Because I won't use our daughter as a weapon against you. I won't force you to choose between your empire and your child. I've seen what that kind of pressure does to a man. And if I want to choose her anyway..." The question hung in the air between them, loaded with possibilities Elena was afraid to hope for. 3 days later, Elena was released from the hospital, but baby Sophia remained in the NICU. Elena had named her after Antonio's grandmother, a detail that hadn't escaped his notice. She'd spent every waking moment by the incubator, talking to their daughter, reading to her, singing soft Spanish lullabies her own mother had sung to her. Antonio had been there too, a silent presence that somehow made everything both better and infinitely more complicated. The doctors say she can go home next week, Elena said as they sat in the NICU waiting room, the first real conversation they'd had since that night in her hospital room. Home. Antonio's voice was carefully neutral. Where's home for you now, Elena? She didn't answer immediately. Home was supposed to be the tiny studio apartment she'd been renting month to month, but the thought of bringing Sophia there, to that cramped space with thin walls and unreliable heat, made her stomach clench with anxiety. I'll figure it out, she said finally. No. The word was quiet, but absolute. You'll come back to the house. Elena's head snapped up. Antonio, I can't. Not the mansion, he clarified quickly. The safe house on Lake Shore. It's secure, private. Sophia will have everything she needs. And what about what I need? The question came out more vulnerable than she'd intended. Antonio turned to face her fully, his dark eyes intense. What do you need, Elena? The honest answer was him. She needed him. Needed the way he'd held her during thunderstorms. Needed his laugh when she told terrible jokes. Needed the way he'd looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. But that was before. Before the lies and the betrayal and the 6 months of silence. I need to know this isn't about guilt, she said instead. I need to know you're not offering this because you feel responsible. I am responsible. Antonio's voice was rough. I'm responsible for not trusting you. I'm responsible for believing Maria's lies. I'm responsible for throwing away the best thing that ever happened to me because I was too proud and too stupid to see what was right in front of me. Antonio, she's been planning this for months, Elena. Maria. I had my people look into it after I realized what I'd done. She's been feeding information to the Torino family, using her position in my organization to set up territory grabs. The photos of you and your brother? She hired a photographer to make them look intimate. The late-night visits to my office? She was copying files, stealing business plans. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. How long have you known? 2 weeks after you left. The admission hit her like a physical blow. I've known for 5.5 months that I destroyed our marriage based on lies. Then why didn't you? Because I'm a coward. The words seemed to tear from his throat. Because I was terrified that even knowing the truth you'd never forgive me. Because I convinced myself you were better off without me, without the danger that comes with my name. Elena stared at him, seeing the pain he'd been carrying, the guilt that had been eating him alive. What happened to Maria? Antonio's expression went cold, dangerous. Maria is no longer a concern. The way he said it, with that deadly calm, made Elena's blood run cold. She'd known when she married him what kind of man Antonio was, what kind of business he ran, but she'd never seen that side of him directed at someone who'd hurt her personally. Antonio, tell me you didn't. She's alive, he said quickly, reading the fear in her eyes. Exiled. Stripped of everything she stole, everything she thought she'd gained. She's working in a diner in Nebraska under a new identity, and she knows that if she ever shows her face in Chicago again, exile won't be an option. Elena nodded slowly. It was more mercy than Maria deserved, and they both knew it. The safe house, Antonio continued, his voice gentler now. It's not a prison, Elena. You can leave whenever you want. But while you're there, you and Sophia will be protected. No one will hurt you again, I swear it. And us? The question slipped out before she could stop it. What are we in this arrangement? Antonio was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the NICU where their daughter slept. We're whatever you want us to be. Co-parents, friends. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Strangers, if that's what you need. But Elena could hear what he wasn't saying, could see it in the way his hands clenched into fists, the way his jaw tightened with barely controlled emotion. He wanted more. He wanted everything they'd lost, everything he'd thrown away. The question was whether she was brave enough to want it too. The safe house was nothing like Elena had expected. Instead of the fortress she'd imagined, it was a beautiful lakefront home with floor-to-ceiling windows and a nursery that looked like something out of a magazine. Antonio had thought of everything, from the state-of-the-art security system to the baby monitor that connected to his phone. You did all this in 3 days? Elena asked as she walked through the space, Sophia sleeping peacefully in her arms. I had help. Antonio's voice was carefully neutral, but she could see the pride in his eyes as he watched her take in the details. The rocking chair positioned perfectly to catch the morning light. The mobile above the crib that played the same Spanish lullaby she'd been singing in the hospital. You remembered, she whispered, touching one of the delicate butterflies that danced above their daughter's bed. I remember everything about you, Elena. Every song, every smile, every tear I caused. His voice was rough with emotion. I remember the way you hummed that song when you cooked, the way you'd sing it when you thought no one was listening. The intimacy of the moment was broken by the sharp ring of Antonio's phone. His expression immediately shifted, becoming the cold mask she remembered from their marriage. "What is it?" he answered curtly. Elena couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she watched Antonio's face grow darker with each passing second. "When?" A pause. "How many?" Another pause. "Longer this time. Double the security around the lake house. No one gets within a mile without my permission." He hung up and turned to Elena, his expression grim. "We need to talk." Elena's heart began to race. "What's wrong?" "The Torino family knows about Sofia." Antonio's voice was deadly calm. "They know she's mine, and they're planning to use her against me." The words hit Elena like ice water. She instinctively tightened her hold on Sofia, her maternal instincts screaming danger. "How do they know?" "Maria." The name came out like a curse. Before she left Chicago, she made one last play for revenge. She contacted Vincent Torino, told him about the baby, about the divorce. She painted a picture of a vulnerable ex-wife and an illegitimate heir that could be used as leverage. Elena felt sick. What do they want? Territory. Business. My head on a platter. Antonio moved closer, his presence both comforting and terrifying. "But they're not going to get any of it. I won't let them touch you or Sofia. Maybe I should leave Chicago," Elena said quietly. "Take Sofia somewhere they can't find us." "No." The word was absolute, final. "Running won't solve this. The Torinos have resources, connections. They'd find you eventually, and when they did, I wouldn't be there to protect you. So what do we do?" Antonio's eyes met hers, and she saw something there that made her breath catch. Determination, possessiveness, love. "We end this. Permanently." The way he said it with that cold finality reminded Elena exactly who she'd married. Antonio Valentino wasn't just a businessman with questionable associates. He was the head of one of the most powerful crime families in the country, a man who'd built his empire on the bones of his enemies. "Antonio, I don't want you to do something you'll regret because of us. The only thing I regret is letting you walk away 6 months ago." He moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "I regret not fighting for you, not trusting you, not protecting what was mine. I'm not yours anymore," Elena whispered, but even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. "Aren't you?" His voice was soft, dangerous. "Then why does your heart race when I'm close? Why do you still wear your wedding ring on a chain around your neck?" Elena's hand flew instinctively to her throat, where the thin gold chain disappeared beneath her shirt. She'd thought she'd hidden it well, but Antonio had always been observant. "It doesn't mean anything," she lied. "It means everything." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched the chain through her shirt. "It means you never stopped being mine, just like I never stopped being yours." The moment stretched between them, charged with 6 months of separation and longing. Sofia stirred in Elena's arms, making a soft sound that broke the spell. "She needs to eat," Elena said, grateful for the distraction. "I'll make dinner while you feed her," Antonio said, stepping back. "We can discuss security arrangements." As Elena settled into the rocking chair to nurse Sofia, she watched Antonio move around the kitchen with surprising domesticity. He'd learned to cook during their marriage, claiming he wanted to take care of her the way she took care of everyone else. It was dangerous, this glimpse of the man she'd fallen in love with. Dangerous to hope that they could find their way back to each other, that the love that had brought them together could survive the betrayal that had torn them apart. But as she looked down at Sofia's perfect face, at the daughter who had Antonio's dark eyes and her own stubborn chin, Elena couldn't help but think that some things were worth fighting for, even if it meant going to war. The attack came at dawn, just as Elena was feeding Sofia her morning bottle. The first sign was the sudden silence. The birds that had been singing outside the lake house went quiet all at once, an unnatural hush that made Elena's skin crawl. Then the security alarms began to wail. Antonio was beside her in seconds, fully dressed and armed, his phone already pressed to his ear. "How many?" He barked into the device. "From which direction?" Elena clutched Sofia closer, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was what she'd feared, what she'd tried to prevent by staying away. Their daughter was barely a week old, and already she was in danger because of who her father was. Elena, listen to me. Antonio's voice was calm, controlled, but she could see the fury burning in his dark eyes. There's a safe room behind the bookshelf in the study. You take Sophia there and you don't come out until I come for you personally. What about you? I'm going to end this. He cupped her face in his hands. His touch gentle despite the violence she could see coiled in his muscles. I'm going to make sure no one ever threatens our family again. Our family. The words hit Elena like a physical blow, hope and terror warring in her chest. Promise me you'll be careful, she whispered. Promise me you'll keep our daughter safe. Always. Antonio kissed her forehead. A brief, desperate touch that felt like goodbye. Then he was gone, moving with the deadly grace that had made him legendary in Chicago's underworld. Elena ran for the study, Sophia crying in her arms as the sound of gunfire erupted outside. The safe room was exactly where Antonio had said it would be, a small windowless space equipped with everything they might need for a siege. She settled onto the small couch, trying to calm Sophia, while the sounds of battle raged outside. Through the security monitors she could see Antonio's men taking positions around the house, their movements coordinated and professional, but it was Antonio himself who held her attention. He moved through the chaos like a force of nature, appearing and disappearing behind cover, his commands sharp and clear even over the comm system. North side is clear, came a voice through the speakers. South side secure, came another. Boss, we've got 3 vehicles approaching from the east. Elena watched the monitors as black SUVs roared up the driveway, men in tactical gear pouring out with military precision. The Torinos had come prepared for war, but they hadn't prepared for Antonio Valentino's rage. Elena had never seen him like this. Cold, calculating, utterly ruthless. He moved through the attacking force like death itself, each motion economical and deadly. This wasn't the gentle man who'd sung to her in Italian, who'd held her during thunderstorms. This was the king of Chicago's underworld, protecting what was his. The battle lasted 20 minutes. When the gunfire finally stopped, Elena's ears were ringing with the silence. Elena. Antonio's voice came through the intercom, rough and tired. It's over, you can come out. She found him in the living room, his expensive suit torn and bloodied, but alive. Gloriously, beautifully alive. Is it finished? She asked. Vincent Torino is dead. His lieutenants are either dead or in custody. The threat to our family is over. Antonio's eyes found hers across the room. But there's something else. Something you need to know. Elena's heart clenched. What? Your brother. Detective Morrison, he was here. The blood drained from Elena's face. James was part of this? No. Antonio's voice was gentle now. He was trying to protect you. He'd been tracking the Torino family's movements, trying to warn us about the attack. He took a bullet meant for me. Elena's legs gave out and she sank onto the couch, Sophia still clutched in her arms. Is he? He's alive. Critical but stable. He's at Northwestern Memorial under guard. Antonio moved closer, his expression soft. He saved my life, Elena. Your brother saved the life of the man who threw you away. Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks. Why would he do that? Because he loves you. Because he knows you love me. Even after everything I've done. Antonio knelt beside the couch, his bloodied hands gentle as he touched Sophia's tiny fist. Because family protects family, no matter the cost. Elena looked at this man she'd loved, lost, and found again. The father of her child, the king of a dangerous world, the only man who'd ever made her feel truly safe. What happens now? She whispered. Now we heal. We rebuild. We become the family we were always meant to be. Antonio's eyes met hers, vulnerable and hopeful. If you'll have me. If you can forgive me for being too proud and too stupid to trust in what we had. Elena thought about the last 6 months, the loneliness and fear and desperate love that had sustained her through the darkest period of her life. She thought about Sophia, who deserved to know her father, who deserved to grow up surrounded by love instead of secrets and lies. I never stopped loving you, she admitted quietly. Even when I hated you, I never stopped loving you. Elena. Antonio's voice broke on her name. But if we do this, if we try again, things have to be different. No more secrets, no more lies, no more assuming the worst of each other. No more secrets, Antonio agreed. No more lies. And Elena? He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. No more divorces. Elena's breath caught as he opened the box, revealing not a ring, but something even more precious. Her original wedding ring. The simple gold band he'd given her in a courthouse ceremony 2 years ago. I never threw it away, he said softly. I couldn't. It was all I had left of you, of us, of the best year of my life. Elena held out her trembling left hand, watching through tears as Antonio slipped the ring back onto her finger where it belonged. I love you, Elena Rodriguez Valentino, he whispered against her knuckles. I love you, and I love our daughter, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt it again. I love you too, Elena whispered back. God help me. I love you too. As Sofia slept peacefully between them, Elena and Antonio held each other in the ruins of their living room, surrounded by the evidence of the war they'd fought to protect their family. It wasn't the reunion she'd dreamed of, but it was theirs, messy and complicated and absolutely perfect. Sometime later, Elena stood in the garden of their new home, watching Sofia take her first wobbly steps across the grass toward her father. The little girl had Antonio's determination and Elena's stubborn streak, a combination that promised interesting teenage years ahead. Mama, look! Sofia squealed as she reached Antonio, who swept her up in his arms and spun her around until she giggled with delight. Elena smiled, her hand resting on her growing belly. Baby number 2 was due in the spring, and this time, there would be no secrets, no lies, no fear, just love and family and the quiet joy of a life rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal. James had recovered fully from his injuries and had been promoted to detective captain, his heroism during the Torino incident earning him recognition throughout the Chicago PD. He visited every Sunday for dinner, having become the uncle Sofia adored and the brother Elena had always needed. What are you thinking about? Antonio asked as he approached with Sofia on his shoulders. Just this. Us. How we almost lost it all. Elena leaned into his side, feeling the solid warmth of him, the security of his arms around her. We didn't lose it, Antonio said firmly. We fought for it. We bled for it. We earned it. Elena nodded, thinking about the long road that had brought them here. The pain, the separation, the moment when everything had seemed lost forever. But they'd found their way back to each other, stronger and wiser and more grateful for what they had. No regrets? She asked. Antonio was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes serious as he considered the question. I regret the time we lost. I regret the pain I caused you, but I don't regret the journey that brought us here, because it taught me something I never knew before. What's that? That love isn't about possession or control, it's about trust. It's about choosing each other every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Elena smiled, rising on her toes to kiss him softly. I choose you, Antonio Valentino, today and every day for the rest of our lives. And I choose you, Elena Valentino, my wife, my partner, the mother of my children, the love of my life. As the sun set over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the Valentino family headed inside for dinner. They were no longer the broken, separated people they'd been 6 months ago. They were whole, healed, and home. And that, Elena thought as she listened to Sofia's laughter echoing through their house, was worth every moment of pain it had taken to get here. This story has come to an end here. If this tale of second chances and family touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support makes all the difference in bringing you these emotional journeys. Until the next story.